Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times. Hello, and welcome back to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. We have had a little break from recording here, but we are back and better than ever. We're still one man down, I should say. Tom, unfortunately, will not be with us this week, but I'm here with Francis. Francis, how are you doing? It's been ages.
It has been ages, but it's good to be back. It's good to be back in the UK as well, because I have been away on holiday for the first time in a long time, really. I think since the pandemic, back to Brazil. So that was a really enjoyable time, seeing family. One of my cousins got married. It was just a really enjoyable trip, really. It saw a couple new cities that I hadn't been to before. Yeah, all in all, really fun time. And from a fintech point of view, got to see Pix in action, and I'll be talking about that later. But yeah, it was really interesting to see how impressive that sort of payment method really is. I mean, we always write about it, but in person, it is something. Definitely very, very impressive.
Yeah, awesome. I really look forward to hearing a lot more about it. And I guess, from your, as our lead LATAM correspondent, I bet it was awesome to be really boots on the ground and just kind of see a lot of fintech stuff. So I look forward to hearing about that a little bit later. But of course, we're here to talk about some of the big fintech news that's happening right now. So what is your story this week?
So this week, I'm going to be talking about Mastercard and how it's improved payments convenience using digital wallets with the launch of Mastercard Pay Local.
Awesome. And I am keeping in the sort of payments theme with my article, and we're going to be talking about how Affirm has officially launched in the UK, bringing its pay over time options from North America. Anyway, Francis, I'm going to let you kick off with your article, so take it away.
So Mastercard has introduced a new service to make it easy for customers to utilize local digital wallets and make card payments to merchants. So the new service, called Mastercard Pay Local, enables both resident cardholders and international travelers to link their credit and debit cards to a digital wallet without having to set up or top up a prepaid account. So consequently, this improves convenience by allowing customers to start spending money immediately. Looking sort of at one region specifically, the Asia Pacific region will benefit from Mastercard Pay Local, as it is going to be facilitating payments for consumers at more than 35 million merchants in the region that accept Dana in Indonesia, Touch and Go in Malaysia, Bakong in Cambodia, and Lankapay in Sri Lanka. Additionally, consumers can now pay micro, small, and medium enterprises that do not accept traditional card payments. Tourists and international travelers can also enjoy convenient payments across the destinations they're visiting. So, again, sort of like I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons this stood out so much to me was following my trip to Brazil. And while I was there, although I am a Brazilian citizen and I am entitled to use Pix, I don't actually have a Pix account. And because of that, I wasn't really able to utilize myself how beneficial that sort of local payment method really is. As I said before, I was really able to see it everywhere you go. They sort of have it there saying Pix accepted here. And when I saw people using it, it was really as simple as, type in your number, Pix there, and it sent money, gone. It's so simple and really impressive. And I thought as well, what was interesting about it is when friends were owing each other money, instead of sort of saying, oh, can you, I don't know, PayPal me this or bank transfer me this, it was always, can you send me a Pix? And I was like, yeah, of course I'll do that really easily. And again, so I really got to see it in action, and it was really cool, and I really liked it. And being able to tell people about what I do for work and being able to say, well, I know about this, was also quite fun. But again, not being able to use it was a bit annoying. And when I saw this article about Mastercard Pay Local, I thought to myself, if there was, and again, it might actually have it. I haven't actually checked, because as I came back from the trip and then saw this article, so it would have been helpful if I'd seen it before. Was able to do some research and see if I could have linked my normal payment methods through Mastercard to pay for something in Brazil, but ho-hum, it is what it is, isn't it? But at the end of the day, I think if there is an easy way and I think Mastercard Pay Local is especially useful for travelers, because if you can link your debit and credit cards without having to make this account and a prepaid top-up or anything like that, and you can just simply link your normal payment method and then have the benefits of the local spending methods, I think that benefits the consumer as they can have flexible payments and really easy access to payments as well, if it's anything like Pix, which I imagine it is. And it benefits the merchants as well, because they're the ones that at the end of the day are selling more because people can spend money there. So all in all, I think it is a really, really good initiative. And I think the more that we see these payment providers really enable and facilitate local payment spending without having to be a local necessarily, I think that's a really good thing. And it's definitely stuck out to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love how you've kind of explained that and how you've like related to your own experience. I think there's been so many times where I've been traveling where I've thought, man, I'd really love to be able to just sort of almost like integrate into the local economy better and be able to pay with the stuff that makes sense for the place that you are. So yeah, like you, I was really really pleased to see this article. And I think what else is also really nice about the solution is that you can even pay, small businesses that do not accept the traditional card payments as one of the features, which I think is great because, when you're traveling and stuff and it's always, I don't know about you, Francis, but whenever I travel now, it is always a bit like, ooh, do I need to get cash out? Do I need to like exchange money? Things like that. And you kind of sort of stuck in that cycle of, ooh, should I get some cash? Should I not? Is there any point? Because everyone accepts card now. But of course, if you go to some of the sort of more sort of remote locations or different economies, different ecosystems, cash is still very much prevalent. So to be able to pay, small businesses that do not accept the traditional card payments, but with these different local payment methods is really great. And I think it's going to be really important for tourists and international travelers to be able to enjoy sort of that convenience, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Payments is always about convenience and about having that like frictionless experiences, and especially when you're traveling, I think that's a really big thing to be able to sort of just integrate into the culture that you're exploring, whether you're exploring that for work or for pleasure. It's really important to be able to actually do things like a local. Otherwise, you're not going to have that full experience. And especially to keep things, secure, and, the security, as well as the simplicity, I think is really great. So I think this is just sort of another example of kind of Mastercard coming in with these sort of big digital payment solutions that are actually just so important and so not necessarily unique, because I don't think they are unique, but I think just really great to see those kind of things being thought about. And like we always talk about with fintech, that fintech really does exist to find those niches and find the solutions to like the small problems that might be small in the sort of grand scheme of things, but actually affect a lot of people. And having a solution to that problem would make a really big difference. And this is a really great example of that. And I think just being able to use a digital wallet to spend immediately in whatever region you might be in, whether you are a tourist or a local, I think is brilliant. And it's just such a really great solution to see. And it's a really nice thing to see, especially, obviously on the back of your trip as well. It's just really great to think that you could just use your digital wallet anywhere. And that's really cool.
I think one of the interesting things that you said there was about sort of getting cash out, because you're right, people, especially in these rural locations and sort of more remote places, cash is still definitely king. But I think the interesting part of it is when you go to these places as a tourist, as a traveler, and you don't have access, I mean, you then have to pay the exchange rates and you have to pay these huge fees to just get some money out to be able to afford stuff wherever you're going. And I think if payment providers can sort of say, well, here's an alternative where you don't need to do that, I think that's just an absolute win-win for everyone involved, because, again, simplicity for the consumer means, in turn, it's going to be more spending at local merchants. And for local businesses and small SMEs, that's exactly what they need. They need as much sort of revenue as they can get. And the easier it is for people to spend, the more they will get. So, yeah, ultimately, I think it's a really good initiative by Mastercard. And I'm sure we'll see their competitors do something very similar. But yeah, with that, why don't we go to your article next?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Francis, for that. So, on a very kind of similar vein in terms of payments, Affirm, the payment network aiming to empower consumers while helping merchants drive growth, has officially launched in the UK, bringing its pay over time options into the region. So Affirm was founded back in 2012, and it offers approved customers an alternative to credit cards and other pay over time options, providing the ability to split the total cost of purchase into budget-friendly payments. So, similar to like a buy now, pay laters and all that, things like that. With the rise of buy now, pay later and other sort of payment methods, I think it's coming at a really good time for Affirm to be launching in the UK, because Affirm does not have any late fees or hidden charges, so it's kind of supporting this idea of responsible credit, which is something that I know we've kind of discussed before on the podcast and on just the Fintech Times in our features as well. This idea of, is buy now pay later a good thing, or is it going to lead people to get into more issue with sort of credit and debt? But Affirm has sort of, they don't have the late fees, they don't have the hidden charges, and they're aiming to really build on this expansion that they have with their presence in the US and Canada, and build on its network of over 50 million consumers and over 300,000 active merchants worldwide, including things like Amazon, Shopify, and Walmart. So it's actually been authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, and it's going to be offering its interest-free and interest-bearing monthly payment options, which is fixing any interest applied and calculating it based solely on the original principal amount, so that the basically the amount of any interest did not increase or compound, and that it is promised that consumers will always know what they owe up front. And I just thought this was a really interesting one, because like I said, we've talked a lot about buy now, pay later and this kind of alternative credit industry that has really sprung up in the last few years. And, like we've said, buy now, pay later really had its moment a couple of years ago. It was the thing in fintech, right? We couldn't have a conversation about payments without having a conversation about buy now, pay later. And I think the industry has moved on somewhat in terms of other things are like trending now, and other things are maybe a little bit more front of mind when we think about payments. But buy now, pay later is still there. Like, it hasn't died down. It's just kind of become, a cemented excuse me, it's kind of become just cemented as a payment method that is available to people, and a lot of consumers like it. And, especially with now we are kind of officially on the run up to Christmas and the festive period, and, still being quite tricky economically in the UK at the moment. I know we've just had our most recent budget announcement from the government and things like that, but it's still, things are still a bit tricky when it comes to the economy and the cost of living. So I feel like a lot of consumers are going to be looking towards sort of alternative payment methods like buy now, pay later, or pay over time options, as Affirm has. So I thought this was a really interesting time for Affirm to be launching, a really good time for Affirm to be launching. And just in general, I thought it'd be good to sort of catch up again about kind of what we feel about these kind of payment methods like buy now, pay later. Things have really progressed since they kind of first boomed on the scene, because they've been around for a very, very long time. But, with when that peak of interest boomed a few years ago, there was a lot of debate over, the positives and the negatives around buy now, pay laters and around sort of just credit in general. So I thought it would be really good to kind of catch up and sort of see where we are at the moment when it comes to sort of buy now, pay later. So it'd be great to get your thoughts on this, Francis, and kind of how you have seen sort of that industry evolved, and what you think about sort of Affirm launching in the UK, and just generally kind of, your thoughts about buy now, pay later in the UK right now.
Generally, good things. I don't think I'm. I remember when I first heard about BNPL, when I first sort of started working here, and I remember being very sort of cautious about it, thinking that it might be something that organizations are doing to trip consumers up, and sort of the idea of hidden fees or late fees, and that it was all sort of like a very big trap. However, sort of over time, I've realized that it definitely isn't that. And as I've actually used BNPL services myself, I've realized that they can in fact be extremely helpful, especially the sort of pay in 12, pay in 3, pay in 6, whatever it might be. They do make financial management much, much simpler. And at the end of the day, I think that is a very, very important thing that organizations have to strive to achieve. And that is make financial management, A, more accessible, and B, simple. And, I think organizations, once they start to focus on ensuring that their consumers have a very good financial well-being, their consumers are more likely to continue to shop with them or use their services, because they're seeing benefits, and probably to their mental health as well as their sort of their finances in general, because they feel more confident in what they're doing. And I think one of the great examples in the article is talking about flights, and how flights can be extremely pricey, and a lot of people will sort of only go abroad using a flight of some kind probably once a year. So if you can then manage that once a year payment throughout the year, it doesn't become a burden on one specific month where you have to say, I have to completely cut back on everything. I have to get just the bare essentials because I need to be able to afford this flight. Instead, you can do something, pay in 6, pay in 12, where you say, right, each month I'm going to pay this specific amount. And it's, with Affirm's example especially, knowing exactly what you need to pay up front, again, just builds on that confidence, because then the users can say, right, well, this is how much I already know I'm spending this month, therefore I have this much left to spend. And I think that sort of good financial management is really encouraged by BNPL. So while I can see why people might still be pessimistic, I mean, you hear about all these debt stories that people get into. I think without trying to abuse the service and using it sort of rationally, I think it is really good for financial management.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've raised some really valid points there. And I really like the word that I sort of really picked up on that you just said then was abuse. And I think that is the key there. I think, like you, I remember when Buy Now Pay Later was first really booming onto the scene, and we were like, it felt like every other story we were doing at the Fintech Times was about Buy Now Pay Later in some respect. It was almost quite a very contentious issue, because I think while you could see a lot of positives, there were still those like sort of scary horror stories and a lot of, people getting into debt over like things that maybe weren't worth getting into debt over and things like that. But now I think as the industry has sort of evolved and move on, it has become just one of those things that is just kind of a part of our digital payment system. And that's really great to see, because I think that's always one of the key features of kind of this industry, in that we have so many alternative payment methods, and this idea of consumer choice is so important to have those alternative payment methods so that people have the choice to make the payments that they want to make. And Buy Now Pay Later and other similar solutions, whatever you want to call it, has all really just become cemented in that. And I think this idea of not abusing it is the key here. And I think as long as, like with any financial tool, as long as you use that as intended, then you're not going to have any issues. And actually, Buy Now Pay Later can be a really great solution for a lot of people in order to like manage budgets and really understand their finances and be able to afford the things that maybe they wouldn't be able to afford if they had to pay everything up front. So there's still a lot of negatives, but I think there's a lot of negatives with every financial product if you look hard enough, or even if you don't. But I think it's really interesting that Buy Now Pay Later has really just become just a I think it's really interesting that Buy Now Pay Later has really just become sort of like a fact of life now, and a fact of this is just what people are using to pay, and that's fine. And I think, as long as we keep it safe, we keep it secure, and like you say, we make sure people understand exactly what it is they're paying. So like with Affirm, they get to know how much they're being charged up front. I think that's really key here. And, I think everything has evolved quite a lot over the past sort of 4 years, or however long it's been since that initial trending boom we had of Buy Now Pay Later. And I think people are more aware of it, and people are kind of understanding of the risks. And as long as we keep up that level of understanding and, making sure people really know what they're getting into, then, that's just kind of how it is. And I think, the industry is really moving towards that. So I think it's really great to see. And it's interesting to see things stay competitive with sort of new things coming in. So Affirm moving into the UK, it's keeping things competitive, it's keeping things moving, and yeah, it's a really exciting time to be in this kind of payments industry, as we're seeing constantly. But anyway, I think that does sum it all up quite nicely. So we will leave that there for now. So thank you very much for bringing your articles and your opinions, Francis. If you want to hear any more about anything we've talked about today, head over to fintechtimes.com. There's plenty more news and insights over there. But very quickly, we will just move on to what I learned this week. So each week we learn so much new information about the fintech industry. Being at the Fintech Times, we thought it'd be fun to share that with our listeners. So Francis, what have you learned this week?
So this week I learned that the global asset manager and Swiss bank UBS has developed and successfully piloted a blockchain-based payment solution aiming to increase efficiency and transparency, as well as enable the programmability of money movements for corporate and institutional clients.
And what I learned this week is that only a third of UK adults have said they read their bank's fraud warnings before making a payment. This is from research from Tunic Pay, conducted by Opinium, which I thought that was not a lot of people to read the bank warnings. But anyway, Francis, thank you so much again for joining me this week. It's been a pleasure to be back and talking about fintech with you. And yeah, I will catch you on the next one.
See you then.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using hashtag TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.